What is going on, YouTube? Today, I'm here to talk about what would happen if the UFC lightweight division had a PFL-style 16-man tournament. Luckily, we already have the rankings from this coming from the UFC Meta rankings. We're using that to create this bracket. All right, starting off with the first matchup. We have the current champion, Justin Gaethje, versus Rafa Garcia. Rafa Garcia is coming off a great win against Alexander Hernandez in the Apex on the Aljamain Sterling card. And Justin Gaethje is coming off one of the greatest wins in American history, if not one of the greatest wins in all of sport history and all of combat history against Ilia Topuria. However, this is somewhat of an interesting matchup. Rafa Garcia, I think, deserves a little bit more respect than he gets from the average fan, right? I'm glad that the Meta Apex I'm glad that the Meta rankings had him in the rankings. I think he is a ranking quality fighter, in my opinion. To be honest, he is number 15, though, so he's definitely got to earn his chops. I think he's like 31 years old, so he's still kind of on the up in his career. We're probably seeing prime Rafa Garcia right now. And Justin Gaethje is definitely on the in-swing of his career, 37 years old, about to be 38. Currently the champion of the world. And, this is a pretty obvious fight. I'm going to go Justin Gaethje with a round 2 knockout. He lives in wars. He would make this somewhat of a war. And this is what Gaethje does, man. So I'm going to go with Gaethje round 2 knockout. Not try to oversimplify that one a little bit too much. I mean, that's pretty obvious. Next up, we have Renato Moicano and Quillan Salkiel, the 8 versus the 9 matchup. Moicano coming off his last one against Chris Duncan. And, he's known for his grappling, right? So his jiu-jitsu is pretty nasty, right? So, no, he didn't beat Chris Duncan. That was a different guy, but What I was trying to say is he's really known for his grappling, his ability to take the back and to be able to dominate from that position. And Quillan Salkiel, we really just don't know what he's necessarily good at. And I think if they were fighting, Renato would be able to shoot early, right? And I know Quillan's grappling looked really good, especially against Jamie Mullarkey. The question is it Renato Moicano level good? Like, Moicano was able to beat down BSD with his grappling. Like, that was super, super impressive with it was Chris Duncan. But that was super impressive what Moicano was able to do. What Moicano was able to do, and you just beat Mullarkey, man. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I think Mullarkey's decent, right? I think he's kind of a UFC quality fighter. But to say that, you would beat... Like, I don't have him beating Gamrot personally. I know that's an upcoming matchup. I don't have him beating Gamrot. But I'm gonna go with Renato Moicano by decision. The first round is all 3-round fights, right? So I'm gonna go with Renato Moicano by decision. I don't think he's as good of a fighter as Renato Moicano is. I just think Renato would be able to kind of lay in half guard, maybe try to throw up some submissions. Renato's still at that upper edge, and he showed it in the Chris Duncan finish. I mean, there's clearly levels. And, I'm going to go with Renato Moicano by decision. Next up, we have Max Holloway versus Dan Hooker. I mean, this is a banger, right? I don't think it gets much better than this. Unfortunately, Dan Hooker is extremely washed. Prime Dan Hooker could make this a pretty fun fight. And, I mean, we really don't know how washed Dan Hooker necessarily is, right? I mean, he did fight BSD and Arman Tsarukyan, so I mean, those are pretty tough fights, don't get me wrong. And he won the first round against BSD. To be fair, he won the first round, right? But Max Holloway is exactly where BSD and Arman are, and he's right at that caliber. I'm going to go with Max Holloway by, round 3 TKO. I think that Max Holloway would eventually... I think the first round... The thing is, Max just doesn't have the power to just, spark out people, right? It's normally death by 1,000 cuts. It's a volume kind of based thing. And with Hooker, I think he's got a decent enough chin, in my opinion. So I think he'd be able to absorb those first and second round shots. I think the first round would actually be pretty damn close. Second round, it would be clearly Max. And then third round, I think Max would eventually just be simply too much for Dan Hooker on the feet. I just don't see him being able to pull that one off. All right, in the next fight, we have Charles Oliveira versus Tom Nolan, man. Tom Nolan. Yeah, this is this is a hydrogen bomb versus coughing baby type matchup. Like Tom Nolan, you got to give him credit. He beat Freziam. That's impressive, right? I didn't think he was necessarily a better fighter than Freziam. I thought he just kind of, I mean, he was able to win the scrambles, right? And he was able to win things like that. So that was all really impressive, but I'm not on the Tom Nolan hype train, and Charles Oliveira is one of the best fighters in this division. I'm going to go with Oliveira by round 1 submission, right? That's just kind of how it is. Next up, we go Arman Tsarukyan versus Rafael Fiziev. This is a banger of a fight. Like, I think personally, this is one of the most fun matchups that you can make right now at 155. Do I think that this matchup should be made under? Absolutely not. That matchup makes absolutely no sense, to be honest. But let's just look at the stylistic breakdown, right? Arman is good on the feet. Arman is not like one of the best fighters in the world on the feet. I think that we can all agree on that. Okay, it's not like whenever Arman strikes, it is show-stopping. Oh my gosh, this guy's super elite. His ground game, and his wrestling, is extremely, extremely elite. And that's what Arman can do. And, you really saw that in the Dan Hooker fight. He was able to kind of impose his will on Charles Oliveira, although Oliveira was able to get the 2 sub attempts. The thing is, man, Rafael Fiziev is dangerous, dude, on the feet. He's like one of the better fighters on the feet in this division. Obviously, you could go Ilya, maybe Ilya Gaethje, whichever one you kind of want to go there. And then I'd probably honestly say Max Holloway third, and then Rafael Fiziev, and then Hoofi, and then Rafael Fiziev is fifth, right? He's in that upper echelon of strikers. Arman, it'd be hard for me to say he's necessarily a top 10, top 12 guy in that region. And an interesting stat for Rafael Fiziev is he has a 90% takedown defense. A 90% takedown defense. He also, he did lose to Gamrot. However, that was due to an injury, and it wasn't really his fault and loss. He was looking pretty decent in that fight, and I thought he was actually going to go on to win that one. However, he did get a doctor stoppage, TKO, for Mateusz Gamrot. So I'm going to go with the March Madness upset. I mean, we're doing a bracket. It might as well be that. So I'm going to go with Fiziev by decision. It's a 3-round fight. I think Fiziev does enough to get the 2 rounds. I could see Fiziev finishing him, to be honest. Honestly, I think Arman's probably the second best fighter in this division, if I were to really say, or honestly best, which is kind of the crazy thing to say. I think if you were to pick anyone who is necessarily the most dangerous matchup for him, it's obviously Ilya, right? Ilya is probably his worst matchup. But second is probably Rafael Fiziev, if we're being for real. Obviously, I wouldn't go, you have to have elite takedown defense and have some crazy striking, and Fiziev backs that up. I'm also a guy who picked Manuel Torres to knock out Fiziev, so I clearly know ball. BSD versus Mauricio Hoofi, right? Mauricio Hoofi. We already saw this fight, and I don't see, this is a terrible, Hoofi's worst matchup in the division is Arman and is BSD. And unfortunately, he has to go. I love Hoofi. I think Hoofi's like a top 6 fighter in this division. Like Hoofi versus Holloway would genuinely feed families, and that should have been what was next up for the division. Gosh, that would have been such a fire-freaking matchup, man. That would have been such an awesome matchup. But this is what we got anyways. I feel bad for Hoofi getting knocked out so early, but BSD, I'm going to go BSD by decision here. All right, next up, we have Mateusz Gamrot versus Paddy the Baddy Pimblett. I think Paddy honestly kind of sucks. I hate to say it. He's a brawler. Don't get me wrong. He's a brawler. I think that the best version of Paddy we will ever see is either going to be next Saturday night against BSD, right? Or we just saw it against Justin Gaethje. It's one or the other. I think we're seeing the absolute peak of the Baddy right now. And I think stylistically wise, I know everyone loves to glaze the Paddy grappling and how elite he is at grappling, right? And he's able to submit King Green after King Green decided to shoot on him for literally no reason. But not only that, I think if this was on the feet, I'm probably going to go with Gamrot. Gamrot was stinging up Oliveira on the feet. He was putting hands on Oliveira. He won the striking exchanges against Oliveira, which is unbelievable to say. Unbelievable to say, right? And I think, dude, Gamrot's just a clinch guy. This is what Gamrot does. Gamrot holds you in the clinch, and if you're not an elite enough grappler to get out of it, you're screwed. This is exactly why I'm picking Gamrot against Soutkild, and this is also exactly why I'm going to pick Gamrot by decision against the baddie, okay? Gamrot's moving on. Gamrot's a crafty vet, man. All right, now we got Ilya versus a coughing baby. It's just like, what does Grant Dawson genuinely have for Topuria, right? He's going to use his grappling because that's his thing, right? That's his thing. And Ilya's probably better. So I'm going to go, here's how I see this fight going down. Round 1, Grant Dawson is shitting his pants, okay? Rightfully so. Not shitting his pants, but he's like, under no means am I striking with Ilya Topuria. Under no means, okay? So he immediately goes to the clinch. I kind of see the scenario, you get the Ilya and Oliveira hip toss. Topuria wins the hip toss. He gets in full mount. He rains down some ground and pound, and he gets the submission in round 1. I'm going to go with Ilya Topuria in round 1 submission. Maybe a club and sub. I could see that, but Ilya's subbing Grant Dawson. Let's see real here. Now we got Justin Gaethje versus Renato Moicano. You know, the last time Moicano fought for the belt, it didn't go over very well. Is this one different for him? Let's think about this, right? So we got Justin Gaethje, not necessarily the best grappler here, right? He got subbed in 1 round versus Charles Oliveira, and we got Renato Moicano, who's not an elite grappler, but an upper echelon grappler in 155, kind of like a Walmart Oliveira. His striking's whatever. I just think Gaethje's still a little bit too much for him. I could see Renato throwing up 1 or 2 subs that just don't land. And I just overall trust the game planning of Trevor Whitman too much for him to lose to as old and as washed up as a fighter as Moicano is. I just have too much respect for Trevor Whitman, right? All right, next up, we have Charles Oliveira versus Max Holloway. Yeah, super fun fight. I'm sure this will be a 5-round bang. By the way, the fights have now moved to 5 rounds after the first round, but I'm sure this is going to be a super fun 5-round banger. Super entertaining. We're going to go with Oliveira by decision. I think he does the same game plan. And I think what people are underrating here is that Oliveira, I don't think you will ever see striker Oliveira ever again for the rest of his career. I think Ilya Topuria gave him PTSD, bad PTSD. Unless he fights someone that he has absolutely zero respect for on the feet, I simply don't see striker Oliveira ever coming back out again. I think we are going to see grappler, I think we're gonna see the Gamrotification of Charles Oliveira, and that's coming soon. And hopefully they make him versus Arman, because he should actually use his striking in that fight. So I might be wrong in that fight, right, about this further prediction. But I'm going to say going forward, he's going to want to be a grappler first. He's really not going to want to hang out on the feet with people. He's worried about what his chin is looking like. Now we got BSD versus Rafael Fiziev. After Fiziev's big win of taking out Arman Tsarukyan, listen, I think the reason why I'm going to pick BSD here is because I think BSD is actually pretty damn nasty in the clinch. I think BSD's clinch game is going to be able to put Fiziev off, right? Where it's not necessarily a takedown. I think Arman would just be like, screw this. I'm just going to fight. I'm going to fight, right? And I think BSD stays to his game plan well enough. Even though he's just a classic brawler, and I don't know if Fiziev would do well with kind of a you saw how he fought against Gaethje, right? I mean, he didn't do well in the classic brawler kind of rock'em sock'em robots fight, and that's every BSD fight is a rock'em sock'em robots fight. So I'm gonna go with BSD. I'm gonna go with BSD here. Yeah, I'm gonna go with BSD here by decision. Fiziev's good, but I mean, he could absolutely get the win here. He could absolutely get the finish here. I mean, that's just what he does. But I could go with a round 4 TKO for BSD. But yeah, that's interesting. I actually think that this should be the next fight for Rafael Fiziev, or whoever loses Patty versus BSD. Wait, do I think that? No, I want Fiziev versus Hooker. I want Fiziev versus Hooker next. That's what I want. Topuria versus Mateusz Gamrot. Mateos is just a better version of Grant Dawson, right? If we're talking stylistically here. I think he's a little bit of a better striker, a little bit of a better grappler, a little bit craftier. And I think he could give Ilya some problems in the grappling. I do. I think Ilya would struggle with the ability to shuck him off easy, right? Even though I still think Ilya could very easily be the best grappler in the division. I think that he would do well enough that he's able to get Gamrot off of him out of the clinch. And I think if they strike, I think Ilya knocks him out 1 round. So I'm going to go with Ilya by first round knockout. Now we got Justin Gaethje versus Charles Oliveira. We've seen this fight before. We saw a first round submission for Charles Oliveira. That was a couple years ago now, though. What adjustments have we seen? We have seen Justin Gaethje be completely full-mounted by Ilia Topuria. We have also seen Justin Gaethje get his face sat on by Rafael Fiziev. And Charles Oliveira was able to lay in full mount for the entirety of the Max Holloway fight. And I don't think Justin Gaethje's submission defense is good enough to be able to get past the current BMF champ. I'm going to go with Oliveira by round 1 sub. I don't think anything changes. I think that this honestly, I think so for the division overall. I think you need to make Oliveira versus Arman next. I think that's next up. And I think the winner of that fight needs to fight Gaethje for the belt. And I'm okay with the winner of BSD versus Patty fighting Ilya next, right? I think those are the matchups to make, because you realistically can make a Patty versus Ilya fight if he wins this fight, but he's not, because BSD is gonna win. So you could have Ilya knocking out BSD, which would be fun, which I'd appreciate, which is actually the next matchup we got on here. So the theoretical matchup that Ilya actually fights BSD next in the rankings, very possible he fights the Muppet himself. Again, he just keeps fighting the same kind of fighter. I mean, BSD is a little bit more of that Gaethje type, like I said, kind of war. So I think he could give him some problems if this goes into deeper rounds, but Ilya is like a minus 300 favorite in my mind. I'm going to go with round 1 KO. BSD is a sloppy fighter, and the fact that he couldn't knock out Gaethje was shocking to everybody, and he should have in round 2. And I don't think BSD. I think Gaethje would still beat BSD today, barely, but I think he would. And I'm going to go with Ilya by first round knockout. All right, now for the championship, we have Ilia Topuria versus Charles Do Bronx Oliveira. I wish I had a better championship. Oh, man, I don't know, dude. I don't know. Well, like I said, I think Grappler Oliveira's already been employed, right? I think that's his new strategy. I think you saw that in a Holloway fight. I think you saw that in the Gamrot fight. And I think Oliveira's really not going to trust his hands a lot moving forward. So that's interesting. That's an interesting kind of premise on how is this going to work for Charles Oliveira going forward, right? How is this going to work? How would he fight Ilya, right? So I think he's going to chase a lot of takedowns, but we clearly saw it didn't matter that he chased takedowns against Ilia Topuria. But I think he'd do a lot better in the clinch. I think he would just literally try to clinch for the first couple rounds, just try to wear down Ilia Topuria, try to tire his ass out. And I'm going to go with Ilya by round 3 knockout. I think Charles would do a good job of evading the power early, but I think it would just be a lot of clinching, and it wouldn't necessarily be tiring on Ilya. It wouldn't like he would be. It's not like he's going to give him that Justin Gaethje level punishment, right? It's not like he's going to be severely punished, and he's not going to throw in the pocket. So, unless you can make it dirty in those clinch scenarios, Ilya's. I still think this was easily also a favorable bracket for Ilia Topuria. If you a sneaky, if you wanted me to pick that Rafael Fiziev versus Arman Tsarukyan type upset, if you're asking me what's that crazy upset for Ilia Topuria, Mauricio Hufi is that crazy upset for Ilia Topuria. Because Ilya is too freaking cocky to use his grappling against Hufi. He's too cocky, okay? And he would try to outstrike, and his little no-mass would just get picked apart at range. Okay, so if you're wondering, I don't think Ilya is some invincible fighter, but I think the bracket just played out for him really well. So I'm going to go with, Holloway at 155 is also really interesting for Ilya. Who else is an interesting fight? Justin Gaethje 2 is an interesting fight for Ilya, right? But I'm going to take him against Arman. I'm going to take him against any of the grapplers, because I just don't think that they have enough for him. But if Ilya's only job was to try to win every fight and not be egotistical at all, which I don't think you can. It's hard to get to Ilya without having Ilya, right? If he said, all right, I'm just going to take you down, Hufi. I'm just going to he would be able to, and he'd be able to submit him, right? I just think Ilya is simply too egotistical to do that. So anyways, guys, that is my video breaking down who I have winning the lightweight division if there was a bracket that happened. Thank you. Goodbye.